Hello and welcome back to revise GCSE history.co.uk. This is video 2 in the topic, the end of the Plains Indians, and in this video today we're going to be looking at the government system of reservations that were used to control the Indians from 1825 onwards. Okay, let's make a start. From 1825 onwards, a system of Indian reservations was developed by the US government on the plains. The Indians were supervised by government-appointed Indian agents on their reservations. The reservations were intended to keep Indians apart from non-Indians on the plains, so for example homesteaders and ranchers. So the purpose of the reservations was to keep the homesteaders and such away from the Indians, so they wouldn't be hostile to one another. On the reservations, the Indians were expected to live as farmers. At first, they were allowed to leave the reservations to hunt buffalo, that's at first. However, after the conflicts in the 1860s and the 1870s, they lost this right, and we've looked at the conflicts in the 1860s and 1870s in the previous topic when we looked at the Indian Wars. We've looked at Little Crow's War, Red Cloud's War, Great Sioux War, and that's what we're talking about. So after these wars, they were no longer allowed to hunt buffalo. Anyway, we've said in a previous video that not many buffalo were on the plains at this time anyway. So, reservation conditions, what were they like? By the 1870s, the Indians were virtually prisoners on their reservations, and conditions were bad. The reservations were usually on land settlers didn't want. This meant that the land that reservations were on was often poor farmland. This made it difficult for the Indians to live as farmers and for them to feed themselves, and they eventually became dependent on government handouts of food and government annuities. And annuities are just annual cash, trying to squeeze it in, it's a bit messy this, payments to the Indians from the government. So they became dependent on government handouts of food rations and government annuities. The Indians were sometimes badly treated by dishonest Indian agents, and Indian agents were people who were supervising the Plains Indians on their reservations. So, housing monies were often stolen by these Indian agents, food rations were inadequate, they didn't sometimes give them all the food they deserved, and medical treatment was not offered by some Indian agents. So they were treated badly on the reservations, and reservation land was often very poor farmland. So, how did the government system of reservations help to contribute to the eventual destruction of Indian culture? Right, so political, we're going to break these down into factors, into groups of factors. So political factors. In 1885, the government took control of legal matters. Indians lost any power to punish band members, and communal reservation land was broken into individual plots by the 1887 Dawes General Allotment Act. You just need to know the name of that, not too much about it, but it broke communal big reservation land into smaller individual plots. Indians didn't need their chiefs, and they became self-sufficient because of this. Alright, so they're political factors. Religious factors, well, feast dances and ceremonies were banned, power of medicine men was undermined, there was also little need for young people to seek visions to give them power in war and in the buffalo hunt, because they weren't fighting anymore because they were confined to the reservations, they couldn't fight against the US Army, or because they were totally dependent on them. Couldn't hunt the buffalo because they'd been destroyed. Educational factors, well, children were taken from parents and sent away to boarding... Whoops, not a very good colour, let's have a better one. Sent away to boarding school. Indians couldn't stop their children from being taken, or government annuities and food rations would be stopped and the Indians would die. The children lived under military-like conditions at these boarding schools, and they were taught to have no respect for their traditional way of life. So have a look. Economic factors. Sioux were banned from leaving their reservations. This meant they were unable to hunt buffalo, and that destroyed their economy. Territorial factors. Through a series of laws, the government reduced the size of the Great Sioux Reservation, and the Sioux Indians were split up into smaller groups. Okay, So, we've talked through everything we need to go over for this video today. Here are 4 quick questions based on the content of today's video. Pause the video here if you wanna, scribble down some answers to these questions. If not, carry on watching, we'll just discuss them together. Okay, do you know your stuff? Question 1. Who were the Indians supervised by on the reservations? They were supervised by Indian agents, and these Indian agents were government appointed. Government appointed. What were the reservations intended to do? They were intended to keep the Indians apart from the non-Indians, and the non-Indians were people such as the homesteaders, so put in brackets i.e. homesteaders. Why was it difficult for the Indians to farm on the reservations? They were expected to live as good Christian farmers. Why was it difficult for this to happen? Well, the reservation was usually land settlers didn't want, and this was land such as poor farmland, which made it difficult for the Indians to grow crops. And finally, question 4. Describe how the Indians were sometimes poorly treated whilst living on the reservations. Well, they were corrupt Indian agents, and what they did is they sometimes stole housing money, or stole food rations. That's a stole food rations. There we are. Oops, I'll just write that better. Sorry, that's a bit squeezed in at the bottom. Stole food rations. Alright, so thanks for watching this video today. There are the 4 answers to these questions here. Next video in this topic is the Battle of Wounded Knee. Thanks for watching, good luck with your studies, see you soon.